Hi, my name is Edwin Tam. I'm an associate professor in civil environmental engineering, cross-appointed mechanical engineering here at the University of Windsor, Faculty of Engineering. I've been asked what I think about research, and to be honest, I never really thought of research as a career alternative for me. I recall being a young engineering student, a co-op student actually at one of the placements, and I was thinking about where I should go next, and I talked to one of the senior engineers, and I think it was him who kind of put it in these sort of three broad tracks. You know, you could do consulting, and consulting is a very interesting way to go. You do a lot of different things. You might be exposed to multiple different projects and multiple different aspects of engineering. But you might not get very deep into any particular one. That's simply the nature of the business. The second one is maybe industry. So for example, you're working for a large corporation or something like that, and you might be involved in a project and so forth for an extended period of time, and you might go from project to project, certainly over your span of your time there. And that can be very interesting. You're probably going to get more in-depth into specific areas that might interest you, and you might see more things, but probably not quite as varied as, say, consulting. And then the third, of course, is research, like what I do right now at the university, or maybe in a large corporation that has a research and development department, or maybe a government think tank or something like that, where you can really think very tightly and closely about certain ideas and aspects. Of course, the trade-off is you might not go quite as broad. These are generalizations. I mean, there's going to be overlap, obviously, between all three, but it's a good way to sort of frame everything. And so, of course, I ended up in the research field, and I'm really glad I did in many ways. But it's interesting to note that research comes in many different forms. The type of research I do isn't what you might think typically of as research, and as an example, I really like going to, say, industry conferences, or maybe business seminars, not your sort of standard academic research conference that you might heard of or would expect. And the reason why I go to these is because you often talk about things that might be the next idea coming up in terms of what are people looking for to solve their problems. These are often very smart, passionate people sitting around the table, but they might not have the interest or even necessarily the capability to walk through that process to find a solution. They want the solution, but they not appreciate the nuances in between as you get there. And so as a researcher, you can bring that to the table because it might be an area that you're interested in, and you think you can bring those skills and the other people, like the students and researchers along board, to help solve or address that issue. So the research isn't your classical, I'm wearing a white coat in a lab setting, but it's about thinking of how you can apply the different things and things that might intersect and touch upon many different stakeholders. And that's especially true in the types of work I do related to sustainability, environment, and so on. And I think my experience in the type of research that I've undertaken, combined with, say, my other professional practices and activities, have really helped because I think I can bring it then to some of my undergrad students and other scenarios that I might be participating in. I remember several years ago, I saw sort of a quiet student in my class, didn't know if he was enjoying it, so I asked him one day, hey, do you like what you're hearing? You're enjoying the class? Because I knew he was a bright guy, and I valued his feedback. And he said, you know what, Dr. Tam, your class is really interesting. I said, why is that? He said, it was one of the few classes where we asked the question, why we do something. We just don't proceed on the how and sort of get to the end. We try to figure out what are the issues behind it, and should we even do anything? So at the end of the day, especially when you have some research areas that are sort of newer and emerging, I think that kind of attitude and that kind of insight is really important because research in those areas really helps us to make sense out of the chaos around us. At the end of the day, research is about finding out what we know, but also finding out what we don't know. Thanks very much.